Hello, all you happy people. This recording will probably be a little shorter because I made the last recording without really looking at the modules. And the last recording was about supposedly market success, and then this one was supposed to be about market failure. And when I say market, we're talking about free markets. Free private markets without the government putting their civil servant mitts into it. But I actually did cover a bunch of stuff on market failure in the last one, so I won't have to cover as much this recording. So that will give you less of an exposure to hear me droning on. Of course, if you wish to have just as much as in the other one, you can play this recording twice. Anyway, okay. So what we said is that the market, the free market, will allocate resources effectively if property rights were well defined. And what I mean by well defined is that the major one is exclusivity. Okay. For the market to be efficient and allocating resources efficiently, exclusivity. Actually, I think that, yeah. For the markets to be efficient, when you put something on the market, before it is sold, you have to have exclusive rights to it. And then those rights are transferable, and the people that you sell it to for a payment have exclusive rights to it. Now, we talked about resources having a common property aspect to them, and the fact that common property basically means that the exclusivity portion of property rights is not defined or enforceable. And that is the case with natural resources. So the private free market, in terms of natural resources, where the property rights are not specifically defined and enforced, a private free market will deplete a natural resource into non-existence. So that's why most natural, if not all natural resources, have to have some government participation in their allocation. We talked about fisheries. Why do you think you have to buy a fishing license if you want to catch carp in Lake Washington? It's because it's controlled by the government, because of the common property aspect of it. Okay, so we talked about a couple situations where the private market depleted resources, the buffalo in the Old West, and the fisheries of the Grand Banks off Nova Scotia and Massachusetts and Maine and Newfoundland in the Atlantic coast because of that same thing. Well, there's also another aspect of common property where the market fails, and that's when it comes to what are called external costs. Now, when an equilibrium is reached in a private market setting where all the property rights are well defined and enforceable, one of the efficient things about it is that the producer and the user of that product pays for all the costs of production. Okay? But when there's external costs, the producing company and the user doesn't have to fully pay for the cost of production. Some of the cost is dumped on everybody, okay? And in the case of this, basically rears its head when we consider pollution, okay? The air and the water have a common property aspect to them, okay? We can't go down to the Weyerhaeuser company who makes paper and say, look, have you ever, well, first of all, have you ever gone through Tacoma and with your window open, you will see, or you will recognize the external things of Weyerhaeuser by the odor, the aroma of Tacoma. They dump their waste in the air instead of internalizing all the costs, okay? So external costs. The air, you can't go to Weyerhaeuser and say, look, I own this 10 cubic foot piece of air. I forbid you to dump your crap in it. Well, what if you said that to them? They'd call security and have you carted away. Same with water, okay? So here's what's happened when there's external costs, okay? Let's pick on Weyerhaeuser again for a minute. Okay, so we have a situation here where we have the price and the quantity of paper, say, okay? And we have a demand curve for paper, and Weyerhaeuser has a supply curve for the paper they make. Let's say it's that, okay? And there is an equilibrium quantity put on the market at an equilibrium price, okay? Okay. Well, that's not all the price. That is the price with external costs. In other words, Weyerhaeuser is not paying for all the cost of cleaning up their waste products. They just dump it in the air. Now, if they were held to account for all the costs of production, including waste costs, what they would do if they had to get rid of it by internal processes, they would have to charge a lot more for their paper. At every unit, at every quantity put on the market, they'd have to charge a higher price. So the supply curve, let's say this is with pollution, and say the supply curve with no P, no pollution, would move back, would move to the left. So they, in this case, have moved to the left. If they were held responsible for all their costs, there would be less paper on the market and it would be sold at a higher price, okay? So what's all this in the interim? That's the cost of pollution. That's pollution. What they figure, and most of us don't object, because external costs tend to be substantial in the aggregate, but they don't affect any one person individually a whole lot, okay? But according, if there were defined property rights to the air or water or whatever they use, the efficient, society efficient net benefits, or the highest net benefits to society, would be at this equilibrium and not that equilibrium, okay? So, when there's external prices, according to the free market, Adam Smith would say and others, when there are external costs, too much of something is made at too low a price. Okay, and there is harm in the pollution that is dumped on everybody. Okay, so what do we do about it? Well, we could have a completely pristine environment if there was no human activity. In other words, we weren't here. Because even the most basic primitive tribes and peoples cause environmental damage by polluting the air or by disposing of the waste products or whatever that is. But if all human life were done away with, most of us would be really ticked, or before we were done away with ourselves. So, it is not the opportunity cost for eliminating all pollution is way too much. As I said in class before, even tree huggers drive their Volkswagens to their rallies knowing that it pollutes the air. But we're willing to accept some level of pollution because we want the use of the things that the processes that create pollution make. Okay? Pollution is not good in itself, but we'll accept it. We'll accept some of it to make use of the stuff that we buy from polluters. Okay? So there have been several ways that people have used to try, methods that people have used to try to get down, diminish pollution. And not much of it has worked. Boycotts, we're not going to do that. If we were boycotting auto emissions, we'd be walking around everywhere, and we're not willing to do that. Okay? Government taxation, well, they just consider that a cost of doing business and raise their prices accordingly. Here's one thing that has worked, though, and it worked in Cleveland. About 1975 or so, maybe earlier than that, but sometime around there, the Cuyahoga River that runs through downtown Cleveland out to Lake Erie caught on fire because of all the crap in there. Obviously, the city people figured out something was wrong. So what they did, they came up with what I think is a very intelligent way to deal with it. They essentially put out to bid to the polluting companies in the area, they put out to bid the right to pollute at a certain level, lower than it was. But whoever bought this right to pollute or permit to pollute could pollute at that level without any interference from the government. But here's the thing. They made it so that these permits were resellable. In other words, if the polluting company even reduced their emissions below the permitted levels, they could sell the unused portion to other companies at a profit. And those companies, if they were able to lower their pollution, they could sell their unused portion to other people. So what this, in essence, it sort of started driving the supply curve up towards the societal optimum level by making pollution abatement or pollution diminishment, if you call it, diminishing, part of the profit process. Because companies are not in business for the good of their health, even if it made pollution abatement or the reduction of pollution part of the profit motive. Companies would try to lower pollution in an efficient way so that they could sell the unused portion as much as they could to other companies. That made it part of the profit motive. And that was a good thing because regardless of what they would have you think, corporations and companies are in existence to make profits, not out of the goodness of their hearts, whether their hearts are good or not. So thanks a lot, and we will go on from here.